now we'll get to the hall. The hall at the corner of the front road and Sand Bay Road was used by the church and thought by most to belong to the church. Everybody thought it belonged to the church. This hall was owned by the temperance movement. And this is where they held their meetings. My grandparents, William and Jane Ann Park, were members. Jane Hayes, I see her here today. I believe she got her name from Jane Ann Little Park. Anyway, the hall was made available for all community functions. The temperance movements were very involved with helping with Christian education needs of the community and the teacher needs for education in the community. There was church suppers held there, young people's meetings were held there, wedding dinners, Sunday school, they held their Sunday schools there. There was concert, plays and parties. The hall was very, very active hall. The hall later became known as the Austin Community Hall. It took the name Austin, of course. Now my Aunt May Davies told me that my father and some of his friends were very good at doing plays. They really enjoyed doing plays, and they got quite good at it. And they would they put on plays in the hall, and one of the plays was really quite successful, and a lot of talk about it, I guess. And they asked them if they'd take it on the road. Well, would we take it on the road? And then they thought, why not? So they played in Ladysmith, they played in Beachburg, and they played in Cobden. So they took it on the road. Had fun with that.
What was it called?
I'm not So I don't know what it was called, but
That would,
Well, Wayne, I might be able to help you with that, because I've got a copy of a play that they were in.
Okay.
Where writing is in it. It was Yimmy.
No,
Yimmy.
Something Yimmy.
she's got it.
Jaw.
okay, so that was maybe the one that they did.
It might be, but I found it and I haven't put
Excellent.
it into the archives yet. Because
Okay, excellent. But there were several books at home, play books that Father had, and one of them I do remember was it was on the outside, if I can think of it.
It's written down there.
A comedy called Aaron Slick from Pumpkin Creek. I'm not sure if that's the one they toured with or not, but there were several books.
That was their entertainment.
That was it, yeah. Okay, so moving along there. The hall, after all those years, still had some life left, and in the late 70s, it was moved down to the Steam and Gas Association at Eric Campbell's. My father was he was involved with the Steam and Gas Association, and that was, I guess, the connection. They needed a place for putting on displays and having their meetings, so it was still in use. It got moved down to there.
How?
They would have skidded it on front road on big skids.
Okay.
Yeah.
Wow.
And,
That was the late 70s.
that was the late 70s, so at that time you still probably didn't have to get a permit from Deer Square or whatever. You just thought of what you needed
It was
to
a
do.
pretty rough road still back in the 70s.
Thought of what you needed to do and you made it happen. So now we're going to touch on the Lord's School, which somebody mentioned that.
Your next slide. Oh, that's, go back. Oh, you're going the wrong way.
Right here.
No, okay, well,
Okay.
whatever. Oh, you're going the wrong way, dear.
Yeah. Okay.
Well, go ahead and do that.
Okay. So the first log schoolhouse, which doubled as a school and also a place of worship, was moved across the road and was replaced by a new modern one-room schoolhouse. And
Oh, go back to that
Right
little
there.
box. No, go back to Little Fox.
Okay.
And that, see the
Okay,
little fox
okay,
up in
this-
front
this-
of the
there-
yes.
Here's a picture of my son, he took it, he was going by and one day he said, there's a little red fox, he said, admiring the church and sitting there. And he took a picture of it and when I was doing this, he said, he said, kind of silly question to ask, but would you be interested in that picture? I said, sure. Anyway, I didn't get it fit in a very smooth way, but anyway, he was there at the church.
Waiting for the time.
Okay,
So,
do the next one.
Looking at the camera.
Okay, that was,
okay, now this is, of course, this is a picture of the church at Christmas.
just past Christmas.
Just past Christmas, that we
With a
just,
lovely wreath.
we put a
It is.
wreath on it, but
Okay,
now
now
we're at the log,
No,
or the
that's number two.
schoolhouse.
Okay, good.
Okay. Okay, I was going, due to amalgamation of rural schools and in the early 50s, they started transporting students by bus to Shovel, and in poor road winter conditions, they would use snowmobiles. Here's the snowmobile. I have some stories to tell about the snowmobile. It was a fun time. You get out in the snowmobile, pick you up, and you travel to school in the snowmobile. And one of the things that some of the older farm boys would they'd say to the driver, the roads, of course, they weren't always plowed and in good shape or whatever, and they'd say, why don't you we take across through that field there, that 100 acres and whatever, and he'd kind of look and say, yeah, no problem, we'll open the gates, we know where you need to go. Cross Ivan Lewis's, and you go up through there, and you go through Elliott's and come out onto the, what we call the Sandway Road now, and of course, this was all a fun thing. You can avoid that gully, go whatever. And in some cases, it worked out really well for some students because they may have had a long laneway to walk to meet the snowmobile, the bus, and that. And we would maybe, and some of these shortcuts, be going right by the door, and they just come out and they could watch and see it coming. It was great. They get on. So one time, we're coming to the 5th line, number 5 schools right in the corner. I believe it was Bill McGregor, that was the driver at that time. And anyway, something happened to steering, and it didn't work out that well. It didn't turn. We went right into Robinson Hodgins's field. So there we were. What are we going to do? We're a bunch of kids and that. So he went somewhere to phone to get, I guess, Anderson and Taylor's tow truck to come and get us. And of course, number 5 school hadn't their transition into Shovel hadn't happened then, so there was somebody there, and the strut guys, they were there, and of course they invited us into the school and to keep warm while we waited for whatever was coming to get us. And we just got in, we're in, and a hockey game broke out right in the school. So,
Teacher wasn't there yet.
so anyway, when the teacher arrived, although she wasn't cross at us, she explained to them that it was good they were hosts, but maybe the hockey game was a little bit above what she thought they should be doing. Anyway, that was just a story I have about that. So, where was I?
You kind of lost the log school.
Okay, going to that, back to that. The first log schoolhouse was doubled as a school, and also part of worship was moved across the road and replaced, of course, by the one room school number 2, Austin School. And due to amalgamation, all the rural schools were moving into Shovel, and
How many kids could you get into one of those snowmobiles?
of course we were small. And,
Not as many now.
I think it was designed to hold 12.
Okay.
And maybe we had more in, I don't just quite remember. Maybe Jack, do you remember?
Sometimes Dick remembered it was pretty crowded.
Yeah. Yeah, we
As you
cried.
got older.
And it
You'd
was
sit
only
in that middle
benches.
seat
Yeah,
and then,
It used to
yeah,
sway.
rock back and forth.
yeah, rock back and forth.
You wouldn't know how many were in
Yeah.
the snowmobile because there was so much smoke.
Exactly. That's another thing,
Yes.
that wouldn't happen today, because the design of these, I don't know whether you could see it, there was a Chrysler engine that was used in them, and there was a thing that canted out in the back to give air for the engine, and to keep it cool, and of course, the fumes, they would kind of swirl around and would come in, and sometimes you would have a headache, and of course nowadays that would definitely not happen. They'd have every
Child protection.
child protection
Don't know why.
agency right on top of it.
Wayne, I don't know if I have it right or not, but I think Arnold Hines drove the odd time, eh?
He
Oh,
did.
yes.
And he was the one that had crossed the snowbank and
Yeah.
balanced it on the
Yes.
snowbank.
Yeah, that's right. He
With
was,
lots of yells.
This,
Yeah.
yeah, he would balance
this
the,
picture came from Basil and his.
that's right. Basil was, Lorraine were kind enough to get me this picture. And, Clarence Murray was
Drivers.
a driver, and he drove this as well. And I have a picture of him
And the machine.
and the machine as well. So, it, lots of connections to going to school back. So, at the time, the school board at Austin number 2 moved to the Victoria Avenue. So,
Speak out.
the Austin number 2 school physically moved, the school board had it moved to Victoria Avenue, and it served as another classroom at Victoria Avenue. And although I didn't attend the school at Austin, I did attend it when it was at Victoria Avenue, and it was grade 3. Grade 2?
Grade 3.
Grade 3, yeah, it was grade 3, yeah. And
Where was it? Where the Victoria Avenue School is now?
yes, the Victoria Avenue School where it is now, yeah. Like I said, I didn't attend it there, but I attended it out there. And
Excuse me while I take a drink.
You're talking about that little white school, was that the Victoria?
the little white school, that was Austin number 2 school.
They moved it down into Clarendon.
That's right, I'm going to get to that as well. So, the Dr. S.E. McDowell School is being constructed now, and a new school that could accommodate all the students, and they brought all the rural schools in, and I think Charters Basil, you come in after probably 2 or 3 years after.
You come in the year after. and-
Yeah, some of the schools. So the Austin number 2 school at Victoria Avenue was no longer in use, and the municipality of Clarendon were holding meetings wherever they didn't have a place for meetings. They're holding meetings wherever they got a place, and they rented the Austin number 2 school, had meetings there, and then they purchased it, and they moved it down to Highway 1 and 48, and that's where it's been since. And where when you walk in
Additions, they made additions.
they put some additions onto it, and that, but where you walk in now, the offices and the council chambers is the Austin number 2 school. Sand Bay. In the early 1830s, the McCagg family settled on Lot 13, Range 1, and started to develop the land. This property stretches from where the old railroad track is to the river. The south part of the property has a beautiful sand beach and known as Sand Bay. My mother's grandparents, George and Carolyn McCagg, had the front part of lot number 13 surveyed and suitable for building, and started selling cottage lots. and this is in the early 20s. They kept the beach as a package and not for sale, but for cottages and locals to use. Now, a little history on that. When the hydro started putting dams in, they would buy flooding rights, buy properties. But George McCagg, he said he wasn't going to sell that. He was going to keep the beach, and he did. He didn't sell any of his property for flooding. He said, "I'll take a chance. It's such a beautiful beach." So they kept the beach. It's a beautiful beach. Different churches would use the area where they would hold picnics at the bay and spend the day at the water. The bay became a very busy spot for locals, of course. After George McCagg subdivided the lots, he built himself a cottage and also built a store to be operated, which they operated in the summer months. The Park family bought one of the first lots and built a cottage in 1926. And this wasn't a beachfront cottage. It was one row back, and I've had people ask me, say, "Well, you're one of the first cottages down there. Why weren't you on the beach? Why wouldn't you be on the beach?" And my answer to them, the best of what I thought would be, was, "Well, you know, the front lots were $75, and the lots back were $25. And my ancestors are Scottish, so that could be your answer."
And the flooding.
Of course, and they would take the chance on the flooding, of course. If there
And we
was
were glad
flooding.
when the flooding happened.
Of course,
that-
it definitely never gets up.
Wayne, did they offer 20?
Not sure.
We're not sure. So, some
Do
of
you
the first.
recall if the flooding was worse back then before the dam?
No. From some of the records I had, it was rare, but sometimes it did come up, but not
Not the way it has
not
the
the way
last.
it has
10
in
years.
the last 10 years. Since they started controlling it, it's been more floods. That's my observation.
5 years ago today, it was pretty high.
Yeah.
Yeah, so some of the first lots purchased were by McFarland's, Armstrong's, Parrs, Hodgins, and Horners. The Horners had several cottages. One of the buildings was called the Sand Bay Pavilion, where they would have dances on the weekends. The pavilion was operated by Jack Myers and Mary Horner Myers. Mary also ran a store out of the back part of the building for a few years. The building is now owned by Greg and Christine Hayes and is used as a cottage. There was also Red Deer Lodge at Sand Bay. It was owned by Jim Conley, and it had the lodge with several cabins, which he rented the cabins, and the lodge supplied dining and social times for these cabins. In an Equity article on September the 12th, 1940, a meeting of the property owners, this is how it reads, a meeting of the property owners of Sand Bay was held recently at the Sand Bay Pavilion. Mr. A.W. Tweedy arranged the meeting and acted as temporary chairman. The name Sand Bay Owners Association was chosen and the following officers were elected. Charlie Harris, President, Emerson Park, Vice President, Mrs. Roy McFarland, Second Vice President, and Mrs. Manson McCagg as Secretary. The following committee was chosen by ballot: Mrs. Anne Langford, Manson McCagg, Clifford Wilson, Mrs. D. Fenton. Later, the Sand Bay Improvement Association was formed to help solve any issues of cottagers in the bay. Manson McCagg was fire marshal for the front part of Clarendon, which included Sand Bay. And he also, he cut ice in the winter time, he stored it in an ice house, sold the ice and delivered it around the bay. That was before electricity. And Manson also took on the task of selling the McCagg properties for the family, of course. Now, Frank Mead bought the Red Deer Lodge and carried on an operating lodge with cabin rentals for a while. Then he started selling off the cabins only kept the lodge and one cabin. Frank's granddaughter still owns the lodge and one cabin as rentals. Mrs. Manson McCagg donated the beach to the municipality of Clarendon to be used by the cottagers and the public. To be used by the cottagers and the public. Every year the Sand Bay Association holds a Sand Bay Day. And it's always on the last day of August of the long weekend.
No, the long weekend of August.
Long weekend of August. Kids with water and beach races, parades around the bay.
Do your pictures.
And this is a parade around the bay. And this started, the parade started because of COVID. We couldn't have the normal activities like we
Get
did.
together.
And you couldn't be close together, whatever. So they decided to keep
Everybody stayed on their own property.
stay on their own property, and we could have a parade. So that we have a parade, had a parade, and we do this now still every year.
It became so popular.
It became
that
popular, and everybody wanted to have the parade. Of course, here's pictures of
A drone view.
a drone view of the bay, and that. This is a modern picture, and that's the sand beach there, and you can see Birch Creek, the mouth of Birch Creek. There's the kids water fun at Sand Bay, and of course bag races, youth bag races on the beach. So
Okay, you're going down to.
okay, so logging on the Ottawa River. There, as you see, out from Sand Bay, Boom Island. That island is actually in days like before it was called Reserve Island, but because of logging and the booms and whatever, it became called Boom Island. Its real name is Reserve Island. So, talking about the logging and whatever, in 1901, there was a letter sent to the Equity by a man that wasn't very happy. He brought his team of horses down to the beach at Sand Bay, and he couldn't find a place to water his horses. It was packed, the logs were piled up all over, and because the logs were packed up so tight and onto the beach, and also 5 miles up and down the river. So in the spring, due to high water, the logs would of course push up onto the shores, and there's so many logs in the river being transported down to the mills and that. But anyway, Sand Bay seems to be a natural for the flow kind of comes in, and the logs that were coming down, of course, would come in there and jam up. And a little Reserve Island, Boom Island, it was very important in the area of the logging business, and it was run by the Gillies brothers. The foreman for this was John Finan. His wife and daughter Catherine were the cooks. The island had a large house for the foreman and his family, with a large dining room where the men were fed. There was a large cookhouse on the island where the meals were prepared, and also a large sleeping camp for the men. My great uncle Joe Little was who was a brother of my grandmother Jane Ann Little, and he worked from the island sorting logs into booms, organizing them to be sent to various depots. This is actually where he met Catherine Finan, and they got married in 1910. They bought an acre and a quarter of land from William Park, who was Joe's brother-in-law, and my grandfather, and they built a small house. In later years, after a heart attack, Joe slowed down, but still kept a garden, and he would love to fish, and whenever he got a chance to. And Joe had asked me as a next door neighbor and to go with him to fish out from Sand Bay. So I would row the wooden boat. He had a boat always on the shore while he trailed this troll, and he knew all the good fishing spots. Our day would be filled with lots of old logging boom stories as we fished. One day he came to ask me to go fishing, but I said my cousin Bill Davies was there for holidays, and he said, that's no problem. One on each oars would be just fine. So off we went. We loaded into his old Ford car, and we made our way down to Sand Bay. And out we went on the river fishing. And of course, to our delight, he's telling all these stories of working on the river and the boom logs and what have you. And of course, one of the stories was about a fellow who fell through the logs. That he called it a tight boom, I remember. But anyway, I think the logs were squeezed together tight. And anyway, he fell through the ice, or not the ice, rather the logs, and he before they could get to him, and they couldn't get him up quick enough, and he drowned. So right away they sent a message to his family, and I believe his family was in Bryson, but the family sent a message back. They'd stated they had disowned him because of being friends. They weren't sure, but because of being friends with another religion, they felt that was what it was. So the loggers had their own service and buried him on a nearby small island. So Bill and I, being young lads, must have appeared like we didn't believe him. And of course, in one of the pictures back there was that I showed you Bill, and of course he had dimples, and he did always look like he was smiling and was up to something. So anyway, Uncle Joe he exclaimed, "Now, you row to that island upstream, and I'll show you guys that island way up there." So of course we rowed, and after walking around the island for a while, we looked and looked, and he was looking, and finally he said, "There's the spot right there." And sure enough, we could see the indentation, and there was just an ordinary river marker at the grave. So the river was a very dangerous spot for boating, and as more pleasure boats became popular, the bottom of many boats and motors were damaged by deadheads. And of course, in the 80s, they had Gillies would contract beachcombers out, and they would give them a section of the river that they would pick up these deadheads and pull them to shore, and they paid them for the logs. How am I for time?
You're
It
getting
is
there.
11:30.
Okay.
Wayne, could I interject just something? Going
Sure.
back to Joe Little and Catherine Finan.
Pardon?
Just Joe Little and Catherine Finan.
Yes,
They actually had a child, my
Yes.
grandmother, that was born.
that's right, Vivian. Vivian was born
What
on
year, Mum?
1930?
14,
August 14th
August 10th.
of 1914.
So Vivian,
Clive Smart's wife was born.
Clive, Vivian Smart was born.
Vivian Little, yeah.
Yeah,
Wow.
on the island, on Boom Island.
And John was there too, but I don't think he was born
Yeah,
then.
but Vivian was born on Boom Island, yeah.
And they were my grandparents.
Yes. Yeah,
We're all
So-
connected here.
Yeah,
so,
a lot of family on that road.
A lot of good people came from that area. And a lot of them are here today.
so the